Our first presentation today will be how to sell your language business without losing your t-shirt. And presenting will be Michael Klinger, who is a CEO at Language Transactions. So we're still waiting for Michael to join us today. Just make sure, okay, Michael has started his screen sharing. Will we see Michael today, or will it be just the screen?
All right.
Hi, Michael. How's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Boston.
Oh, you're in Boston. That's
Yes,
great.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I love how this is turning out and how we can actually work from pretty much every place in the world from the comfort of our homes and speak about those professional topics. So, well, I don't know much about the topic that you will be presenting today, other than in order to sell the business, you have to have one, right?
That's right.
So, okay, so if anybody who's listening us today knows how to create a sellable business, please join us in the discussion in the community, or help us do a nice presentation for our next conference. So without further ado, Michael, you can go ahead and present your slides.
Thank you. I'm going to do my share screen here and do a slideshow. Hold on. You see that on the screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me make this guy here. All right. Thanks, Igor. I appreciate it. Last time, Brian was the last time I introduced. So I'll talk about how to sell your business, your language business, without losing your shirt. I think the original title was. So starting off with, let's see. How to lose your shirt before selling your outfit. So basically, this was requested that we keep it simple. So language owners, many of you who are, if you're an owner or in the process of being an owner, many times you've been doing this for 15, 20, 30 years. And then you can lose a lot of the value of your business in a very short time if you don't do it correctly. So this is just a kind of a who, what, when, where, and why of what to do and next steps and what to watch out for. So this is another person who lost his shirt. I think Kate sent this to me. So if you're from New England, you probably would like the first picture, right? If anyone knows who that is, Tom Brady was pretty famous until he left the Patriots. If you're from Russia, you probably like the first picture more also. No, I'm only joking. I can't joke about leaders currently, given who we have in the White House. But the point being here that we make choices based on a lot of our cultural biases, our personal preferences, and just to become aware of that when you start this process. So the first question is who, and who is the seller in this case? So I'm wondering if you need to see me. Well, as long as you don't see me, we're fine, I guess. So you can divide up this seller in many different ways. If you're a translation company, if you're a single language vendor or multi-language vendor, or if you do interpreting, whether it's on-site or OPI, and being aware of how COVID has impacted your business. If you're a tools company, so machine translation or artificial intelligence, doing linguistic research or content management systems. Or if you see yourself as a full service, being to have the tool, the translation, and the interpreting, so you can provide the whole soup to nuts requirements for client needs. Of note, if you're a company that does software or have tools or technology, that has a higher value, it's a higher sales multiple than if you were just a services company. Who's the buyer? So you want to divide them up into two big categories, and we'll go into this more detail. Strategic buyer is basically someone who's in the globalization industry, whether it's translation, interpreting, etc. So it's a strategic buyer. Professional buyer is someone from outside the industry. So they have either private equity, venture capital, or investors who are looking to start a business. And they often are looking at different qualifications than would be a strategic buyer. So the first question you want to ask yourself is why am I selling? What's your motivation? And as part of this, if you're going to sell, you want to get agreement with your family. I had a case where a man was 77 years old and he was going to sell his business, and we got to the 11th hour, and he came back and he said, "Mike, I can't sell." I said, "Why not?" He says, "My wife doesn't want me home." So if you're planning to sell, make sure this works with your social network. If you're burned out, maybe that's a reason to sell, or if you want to become a millionaire, if you want to stay on board and work with a company and stay there for 3 to 5 years. So once you understand your motivation, then you want to look at a time frame. And it could be you're looking to leave right away, in which case you want to start the process immediately. But maybe it's you don't want to leave the industry yet, and you'd rather structure some kind of an earnout with another business, and in which case you might get higher profits because you stay on board and make money for them. Or you might want to create a partnership as opposed to a sale. Or you might want to sell your business to your employees and make that a long-term plan. So part of this is knowing the time frame for when you want to get out. So here is where I think it's often the most important part, and often poorly calculated. So if you want to get out, when I say how much, it's what is the value of your business, and it's not how much money do you need to retire. If you have to calculate the amount you want to retire, then go back and you have to get an actual value assessment of your business. How do you do that? Well, one of them asked me, I'd be glad to do that free of charge because I've been doing this kind of work for the past 5 or 6 years, and we work with hundreds of companies. So I can give you a fairly clear assessment of what the value of your business is. Or you talk to peers that you know in the language industry who've either sold a business or bought a business. Or you can talk to, read Slater. Florian has a great publication. You can go to NIMSY. Common Sense Advisory has reports you probably have to pay for. Or you can talk to a broker or a generalist and get their input. So here are some general numbers, and obviously there's always exceptions, but if you're under 3 million in revenue, you're probably looking at 2 to 3.5 times your EBITDA number. And for those of you maybe in Europe or Asia who don't use these terms, you can think of net revenue. If you're in 3 to 6 million annual revenue, you're probably 4 to 5 times your EBITDA number. You're 6 to 10 million, you're maybe 1 times revenue or 6 to 7 times EBITDA. If you notice, the higher the revenue money, the higher business you are, the more revenue you'll get and the better multiple you'll get. So if you're 10 to 15 million, you're probably looking at 1.5 or 7 to 8 times EBITDA. The challenge here is that sometimes your EBITDA numbers are low and your revenue is higher, vice versa. So pricing is a very unique situation for each business. If you're in life science as your vertical concentration, then that has a much higher value than say a generalist. Or if all your clients are multi-language vendors, so you're a small vendor, say in France, and you work with Lionbridge or We Localize or SDL, which is now RWS shortly, your value may be lower because reselling that, you may not be able to reap all the benefits because you could lose some of your accounts if you resell to another vendor. If your concentration is in one account, that might be a higher risk. So you might get a lower volume, a lower price. Or say you have 50% of your business tied up in a contract that's going to get renewed next year, and the structure of the offer will be predicated on this renewing this contract. So you've decided, you know why you're motivated to get out, you know when you want to get out, and you know the price that you're looking for based on intelligent information from people who know. So the next step is create a comprehensive financial summary. To do that, you want to include your revenue, your expenses, your GM, and your net profit number. And you want to give that for the past 3 to 5 years. You also want to include a summary of your top accounts, and you can do it anonymously, but basically you want people to know what percentage your top 5 accounts are for your whole business. And then any changes, dips and valleys, peaks, you want to explain in an asterisk. So you want to kind of have an annotated financial summary that you're going to present to potential buyers. The second step, and probably of less importance, but still important, is to create some kind of confidential marketing brochure which talks about your unique strengths, your financial history, and specialization. Quite strange talking to a screen here. And also summarize what makes you special. So how do you find a buyer? Well, there's multiple ways to do it. It's a little tricky when you are looking to sell your business and you're working with all these other companies. You may not want them to know. So one advantage is work with a language broker. That's what we do, and have it, make sure it's confidential. You don't want everyone and their brother knowing that you're selling your business. Another way to do it is simply contact people that you know, companies that you've worked with, and say, hey, we've known each other a long time. I'm thinking of leaving. Is this something you'd be interested in? Or you go to events, Loc World, Women in Localization, iMug meetings, and you meet with people and you network. You can also list with the brokerage service. But most brokerage companies, just to be aware, they have an upfront cost to engage them. And if you're ongoing working with them, there's some kind of retainer. And they often want some level of exclusivity. For language transactions, we don't do any of that. There's really no cost to engage us. There's a finder's fee that you would pay. But it's a different approach that we use than some of the other brokers. So you now reached out. So what is the process of selling your business? What happens? What are the next steps? Basically, it's fairly straightforward. You identify the buyer, you set up a call, you exchange an NDA, make sure that everything is confidential. And then once you have a call and kind of exchange who you are, what you do, what you're looking for, they would request your financials, maybe even before the call. And if everything lines up, then they would send you in what's called an IOI, indication of interest, or letter of interest, LOI. And once they do that, they would probably want to meet with you, and you both want to evaluate what kind of fit this is: personal fit, strategic fit, cultural fit. And that's both sides are doing that. Pricing's not an exact science. When I gave you those numbers, 2 million revenues, 3.5 times EBITDA. Well, if your EBITDA is 40% of your revenue, then the actual price would be, first example, be like 2.5 million. which is more than 1 times revenue. Or on the flip side, if you have a large revenue number, but a small EBITDA number, then again, the pricing is different. If your life science accounts, the pricing might be higher. If you only have 1 account, the pricing might be lower. So keeping in mind that this impacts, there are many pricing variables that will impact ultimately the price that you're going to get. So once you get the offer that you are looking for, you have to think about what your exit strategy is. And here again, when we're dealing with COVID or we're dealing with a situation like that, is that you want to be strategic in this decision. So if your business, for example, has a lot of long-term accounts that you can't get to, and you need more of a sales effort, you may want to find a buyer that has a large sales team. So you structure payments with an earnout. You agree on a lump sum payment. For an earnout, you agree on a 30% payment up front, and then you get payment based on the revenue generated each year. Say you do it over 2 or 3 years. It's quite likely that the value of your business went from 2 million to 3 million to 3.5 million, and your payout will be a lot bigger and better than what you expected. But if you believe that your clients, you're maxed out and you think there's not a lot of future growth, then maybe you want to get more of the payment up front in a guaranteed payment. Or if you think, if I had a partner that could help me, I want to join them, stay on for 2 years, and they don't have to pay out as much, but I want an equity share so that when they grow, I'll grow with them. So originally I was going to do this just about COVID because it brings up a lot of challenges for a lot of people. But I was advised that most of you are not business owners. So I will jump in, and generally thinking of COVID, the market has gone from a seller's market to a buyer's market. So what does that mean? Meaning that the pricing, as you know, if your house is on the market, if it's a seller's market, you get a higher price. If it's a buyer's market, it's a lower price. People are a little gun shy in terms of buying businesses because they can't rely on historical data. You might have done, 5 million for the past 3 years as an interpreting company. But this year, with 80% of your business on-site interpreting, and all of a sudden the courts and the schools and the government are closing down, you've lost a lot of revenue. And they don't know how soon you'll catch that revenue up. So payments are often a lower upfront payment and some kind of an earnout structure paid when hitting targets. So it's important to choose the buyer wisely. So I mentioned there's 2 kinds of buyers. A strategic buyer is typically someone who's in the industry, whether they're your peer or in an interpreting company buying a translation company. So they're often looking for growth in vertical sectors, growth in targeted geographies. They're looking for cheaper production costs. Maybe they do a lot of Spanish and they're a US company. They maybe want to buy a company from Argentina or Peru. Maybe they're looking for technology advantages, or they might buy your company because of your personnel. If skilled management, there's a shortage of skilled management and they need that to grow their business. Or they see the capacity to ramp up production. Professional buyers have a different orientation. So there's private equity, there's venture capital, and there's entrepreneurs, people who go out and get investors to invest in them. And then they go and run the business. They buy it and run it themselves. But oftentimes these people are looking very closely at the numbers, your ROI, assessing risk, and looking at the internal rate of return. And many times the strategy of the professional buyer is to sell after 5 years. So they want to grow it, bring some add-ons, and then sell in the 5-year period. So a buyer should expect a break even in somewhere between 2.5 to 5 years, depending on the size, the volume, and what's paid. But so a sale price, if it's 3 times EBITDA and there's no growth over the next 3 years, then the break even is in 3 years. 5 times EBITDA, no growth is 5 years. But you don't always look at it like that. A colleague of mine who's bought several companies says, I don't look at ROI as a key strategic. The key is a strategic fit. It's common sense. You lower your costs with reducing overhead, redundancies, and adding clients. So you have an accounting cost and the big company has accounting costs, you reduce your accounting costs. Maybe you have people work remote, so reduce the rental cost. Maybe the HR function goes away. So all of a sudden your profits go much higher. That's what he's talking about in common sense. This past year, we helped sell a $5 million globalization company that had a localization business, and they had 30% of their business was AI research, linguistic AI research, to simplify. Their price was above 1 times revenue. And here's an example. Even though it's a hybrid company of services and technology, the technology component was very applicable to what's going on now in the industry. AI is very hot. And that drove up the price fairly significantly. So what we've noticed, and this happened recently with a smaller company, is the 11th hour, you're about to decide and you get nervous and you ask your partner, you ask a friend, you ask your accountant to look at this offer and give advice. Advice on the pricing, the process, of the time frame. And that's dangerous. We had this done recently. A company, the owner was about to sell, looked at the offer and went to ask their accountant and the lawyer that they've worked with for years. And the person said, have them pay everything up front. Well, that's not something that's done in the M&A field. A strategic buyer is not going to pay everything up front because there's a huge risk involved. They don't know what the future business is. So it's usually a minimum of 2 years, could be 4 years. So you want to get advice from people who have done M&A work, who have closed deals, who've handled multiple transactions. Last minute uninformed advice is a poor strategy. So if you're looking for meditation advice, you probably don't want to go to the Dalai Lama. You may want to go to the Dalai Lama. And lastly, when you're a seller and you're wondering who to sell to, some of the basic important items are often overlooked. It's not just pricing, strategic fit, etc. It's, do you trust this person? Can you work with this person? Are you compatible? Do you have the same vision of work? Do you have the same values? What have you heard about this business? How do they treat their employees? Can you get references? Do you have the same vision for your future, the future of your employees? Are they going to keep them or are they going to fire them? So the personal human factor is very important when you're going to be selling a business. So to summarize, make sure you understand why you're selling, what the reasons are, what your motivation is. You have a plan for the next step, and creating some kind of financial document and a marketing brochure that you'll use to sell. Working with professional seller brokers or researching this and networking with colleagues. Make sure you have a realistic assessment of your value of your business before you go out and try to sell it. That's one of the biggest problems we've had to date. You talk to multiple buyers, analyze the fit, both culturally, strategically, and interpersonally. And get advice from knowledgeable resources. Yeah, questions, reach out for sure. I'd be glad to follow up with people. Yeah, and I'm open for questioning.
Thank you so much, Michael. There's a lot of to unpack from your presentations, and I think we have time for a couple of questions, and we do have some questions here, so let me read them. The first one goes from Omar, and he's asking, what makes an MLV or an SLV stand out of the crowd to buyers?
Huh. Good, and good question. And it really depends on, MLV and SLV are very different, right? But I think there's going to be a talk about specialization. And I think that's a big one. So if you specialize in legal translation or life science, those are all that are very interesting and compelling. Another piece is your technology and process. If the technology and process is well developed and smooth and your website looks good and professional, all those things help. It's like if you think you're going to sell your house, silly thing like painting it before they walk up the driveway, it makes an impact. So if your website is good, if your customer service is good, that really helps helps you stand out a bit. Hope that answers it.
Thank you, Michael. And another question comes from Rodrigo. Well, Rodrigo asks multiple questions. I'll just pick the one that I like. And it sounds like that. So valuation can be typically based either on the company fundamentals or historic data related to similar transactions. What's the most common in our industry?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, Igor. What's the common, try to one more time.
Yeah, valuation can be typically based either on the company fundamentals or historic data related to similar transactions. So what is the most common in our industry?
Yeah, it's again, and it's a little bit different than, you buying a house in the market and the house next door sold for X. You can't go by that. It is by your financials. It's not fundamentals, but it's financials. It's taking a look at what your revenue was, what your profit was, what your cash flow is. And then it's a multiple of the net profit or EBITDA number. That's how it's done in almost any country in the world at this point. EBITDA is, if it's not EBITDA, it's net profit. So you have to look at the historical financial data. And the problem now that we're going into is, which I mentioned in COVID, and is that historical data cannot be the only way, because you don't know if that's going to be future, it's going to be the similar in the future. Yeah. Good
All
question.
right. Thank you so much again, Michael, for joining us today. It was really insightful. Thank you.